Joining me now is Montana Congressman Troy Downing. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being
here. Good morning,
here.
Maria.
I'd like to get your assessment here. I mean, the Iranian conflict, of course, looming over President Trump's upcoming trip to Beijing. I've said many times, I think the president has strengthened his hand tremendously going into Beijing with regard to oil after his moves in Venezuela, Iran, and even the comments on Cuba. How do you think this changes the dynamic of the trip?
Well, I mean, obviously, Iran is on life support. The president said it really well. They're not going to survive this $500 million a day that it's costing them. They know that they're, in a very tenuous situation. They've got no air support. They've got no Navy. And I think that the president is right of bringing that Operation Freedom, making sure that we have commerce going through that strait. I mean, the Iranians are completely, out in left field on what is common maritime international law, being able to do commerce through that. And I think that we're going to see a quick resolution to this. And just one thing I just want to add to that, Maria, is obviously people are looking at the price of the pump. I think the president looking at having a tax holiday is a good thing, but this is all temporary. And I think that once we see a resolution there, that we're going to see things go back to normal. And I think this is a great time for the president to go back to China and start talking about these big issues, because obviously this is going to come into play in his conversations with Xi Jinping.
Yeah, so you think the U.S. should just keep the squeeze on Iran? They're not going to be able to handle losing $400–500 million a day because of lost oil sales, because of the U.S.'s blockade, and the U.S. should just keep that economic warfare on?
Yes, I believe that. I think that they're hanging on by a thread. We have no idea who's actually calling the shots there. Obviously, We've seen leadership taken out, first level, second level, third level. So at this point, it's the folks with the guns that are still making the decisions. And I think eventually, as that collapses around them, that we're not even going to have that. I think we're going to see them at their knees here momentarily. They're practically there already.
Yeah, I mean, we've been waiting. You're right about the economy there. Meanwhile, House Republicans escalating this fight over government surveillance as Congress revisits Section 702 of the FISA Act. What's your take here? The Senate approved 45-day extension. The House Freedom Caucus members are demanding the inclusion of a permanent ban on a central bank digital currency or for any reauthorization of this bill ahead of the mid-June deadline. Where does this fall on your priorities list this week?
Well, obviously, the FISA is an incredibly important tool to national security. The president is briefed on information that they pull out of FISA in his daily briefings. This is incredibly important to prevent bad actors from doing damage to the United States of America. But on the other side, there's a lot of us concerned about making sure that we're protecting Americans and making sure that this surveillance is not being used on American persons, that we're not trampling on any Fourth Amendment rights. So that's a big issue. And then the other thing that you mentioned that's been a sticking point is the central bank digital currency, the CBDC. People are really concerned about that. They want to make sure that the government doesn't have control of their finances, and I don't think that's misplaced. I just want to know what we need to do to be able to get that through in the Senate.
So in terms of the reconciliation plans, how do you see things? I mean, I know Congress is also spending much of the month focusing on that $72 billion reconciliation package. The president wants it on his desk by June 1st. And we've been talking about funding this department now for a long time. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is rallying Democrats against a proposed $1 billion allocation for the president's White House ballroom. Democrats are trying to use the floor debate and amendment votes to argue that the package prioritizes the ballroom project over lowering costs for Americans. I spoke with the new Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security here, Markwayne Mullin, last week on this program. Here's what he said about the national security aspect of the ballroom project. Watch.
Secret Service has a mission, and the mission is they are designed to provide security for the President of the United States and the complexes to which he resides in and does work in. The Secret Service cannot take private funding because they also look over embezzlement. What the Senate is doing there is being able to allow them to have the security procedures in place and the infrastructure in place to protect that ballroom and also the grounds that the White House resides in. One of the biggest threats we have is from a drone defense. That is not a cheap approach to have actual drone defense for the entire complex from the White House, not just the ballroom. So that's what that $1 billion goes to.
So, Congressman, how do you see this?
Well, I think we've all seen how dangerous it's become to be the President of the United States of America, just as recently as the Correspondents' Dinner a couple of weeks ago. I think that security for folks in office, for the President on down, is incredibly important. My other concern is that we get this reconciliation bill through. I mean, we've been talking about doing a skinny bill because border security, ICE, CBP are incredibly important to the security of this nation as well. So what I'm concerned about is whether that survives the bird bath, whether we can get that through. But I think it's important, first of all, that we get ICE and CBP and the border funding through as quickly as possible. But I also think that it's important that we deal with the very real scenarios that we've all seen graphically recently on making sure that we do have the protection that we require to keep our president and the folks in office safe. So this is kind of a difficult one. I really believe we need to get a skinny bill through, and we need to have an honest conversation about how we continue to support Secret Service and the great job that they do.
So you get the skinny bill done now by June. Are you on board for another reconciliation before the midterms?
I think we have to. I think there's a number of us that are very excited about doing a Reconciliation 3.0. There's a lot of conversation around that. I mean, time is of the essence. We need to start moving on that quickly, but we still have a window to be able to do that. So I'm very much in support of that.
All right, Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Maria.
All right, Troy Downing on Capitol Hill. Quick break, at least